Start spreading the news.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
New York, I love you. I love New York.
Rose trying to get open, fires away. Bang! It's over! The Bulls win at the buzzer! Iguodala to Curry, back to Iguodala, up for the layup. Oh, blocked by James. LeBron James with the rejection. Puts up the three. Won't go. Rebound box. Back out to Allen. His three-pointer. Bang!
What's going on, people? Welcome to another episode of the Off the Ball podcast with me, your host, Chris LeBron. And on today's show, we're going to be doing something that I started doing a few of these type of shows a few years back. And my guest today, as you see, he's been on the show before. We did one of these redraft shows. I think we did 2014. So he's back, and we're going to do the 2017 NBA draft. We're going to redraft just the lottery. We're not going to do the whole draft, and then we'll talk about some other guys. But Ken, welcome back to the pod.
Thanks for having me on. We had probably I think it was 4 years ago or so that we did the 2013-14 draft, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And, look, if you want to go and research it, you can. I think you and I would both agree it was not the greatest episode of just agreeing on our entire list in the exact order that we both had it. But it was our first show together, led to dozens of others, and excited for today. This is a redraft that we're going to get into it, but it's one that still hurts me dearly to this day because of what could have been for my franchise. So your team, obviously, you guys had the number 2 pick. My team had the number 8 pick, and we made a hell of a pick there. Hell of a pick there. And but in this draft, it's a very unique draft. There's obviously some names you'll hear that are all NBA champions, all-star level players, and then there's some guys in this where you're like, where are they? So I'll run through the first round quick. The Philadelphia 76ers had the number 1 pick. They traded up, as infamously we all know. They traded up to get the number 1 pick. It took Markelle Fultz, the point guard out of Washington. And we all know how that went because this is a part of their whole trust the process. This is year 3 of the process, or whatever year this was. And it did not this was a fail. This was definitely a fail. Followed up by the Lakers taking Lonzo Ball out of UCLA. Then the first domino, the real big boom, Jason Tatum. Boston had the number 1 pick, traded back, right? And they wound up taking Jason Tatum, who I wasn't fully dived into scouting like that, like I was, starting 2020, but Duke fan and bias alone, I was pretty convinced that Jason Tatum was the best player in this draft, and I didn't think it was relatively close, to be honest. No, I was in the same boat. And look, we're both Duke guys. Of course, we think that all the time, but we had seen the year prior, Ingram got drafted. He was pretty good. But when you watch Tatum at Duke, it felt like he was Ingram on steroids because his mid-range, his footwork, and everything that he was doing. It was an underwhelming Duke team at that time, but I think he showed that he was the number 1 guy. But there were a couple of teams that were looking for other positions, namely point guard, and I think that's why he fell. But I mean, looking back on it, this is the one that hurts me the most. I've got the Kobe jersey behind me. I've got the Redick jersey for Duke. I would have killed to have Jason Tatum. I would have countless Jason Tatum jerseys in my home had they made that decision, but instead went the Lonzo Ball route. So that one, it still irks me to this day that Magic did that. And then he swiftly departed soon.
But do you think, because remember, they get traded, right? Lonzo,
yep.
Ingram, they all get traded for Anthony Davis. Is he a part of that trade? So
I don't think he's.
Tatum, Ingram.
Part of that trade. I really don't. I think looking at what he became, because I don't think that there was ever a doubt that Tatum was better than Ingram, even after the rookie seasons. Like, I think that LeBron, first of all, he definitely would have been coming, regardless of whether it was Lonzo or Tatum that are there. But I don't know if they feel the need to make that move if Tatum is the one drafted there. So it is interesting how the dominoes fell, because a few years later they win the title. But that Lakers roster is actually such a fun one to look back on, because there's actually quite a few guys in this draft who are on that Lakers roster. So when we do get into the redraft, I'll list off some of the guys that were on that Lakers team, because they're still in the league and some of them are contributing, but on that particular Lakers team, they were not quite where they are today.
Yeah. So that's always like a big what if. Like, obviously the what if is what if the Lakers or Philly had taken Jason Tatum, because that changes both franchises. But like for the Lakers, it's like a double what if. It's like, all right, what if we take him, and do we make the AD trade? Like, does that change? Like, it's really interesting to see, like, what if, because that's a double what if. So Tatum goes 3, Josh Jackson goes to Phoenix with the 4th pick. I thought he was going to be something. Yeah, I think a lot of people thought like it was Tatum and him were the 2 best players with the biggest upside in the draft. And maybe I think Josh was the one who had the biggest upside. I thought people were like, yo, he's going to be like a Vince Carter-esque type of player. And the inefficiencies got in trouble too. Injury. He did not have a long lasting career. I think he only lasted 4 or 5 years. If I'm correct.
It wasn't long.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, he was out of the league for a little bit too. Yeah, and he hasn't played since 22. So yeah, he was in Phoenix for a few years, then went to Memphis, Detroit, and a little stint in Sacramento, and he is not in the league for the last few years. So yeah, they're definitely a disappointing pick. And then Sacramento, they take De'Aaron Fox, and we know what he's done. Orlando took Jonathan Isaac. Minnesota took Laurie Marketing. I think that was in a trade too, right? I think flipped them. Then the Knicks take France's greatest import, Frank Ntilikina. And then Dallas took Dennis Smith Jr. This was who I wanted. So the guys that I wanted for the Knicks, just off the top of my head, remembering, I was Dennis Smith Jr., Malik Monk, Donovan Mitchell, and there was one more guy I think I wanted. I forgot who. Jared Allen too. I was another guy. Yeah. But those are the guys I wanted at that pick. And Dennis Smith Jr. was an athletic guy, and looked like he could have been something, but then Dallas wound up getting, this next year's draft, they wound up getting a pretty good player.
Pretty good guy, I'd say.
Pretty good, right? Yeah, I think he's doing some good things in the NBA. A guy named Luka, he's doing pretty good. That's going to be another good redraft. Is that 2018 draft? Yeah, that's who there was a few guys I wanted. And I remember a buddy of mine. I'll never forget this. He was like, "Yo, Donovan Mitchell. I want Donovan Mitchell." He's like, he's something about him. I think he's going to be a star. And I was like, okay, but I was more Dennis Smith Jr., but then there was Donovan Mitchell. Like I said, the other few guys, but we obviously did not hit on this pick with Frank Ntilikina. Frank Ntilikina's nothing about him screamed that top 10 pick, and Phil Jackson was still our head of basketball ops, and the amount of scouting he did for Frank was pretty much nothing, and that was monumental fail on his end, because that didn't work out at all. Frank Ntilikina and Donovan Mitchell wound up obviously having it, and it's crazy because we got Zach Collins, Malik Monk was another guy, Kentucky. He was a great scorer. Then you have Luke Kennard, a Duke guy. Then Donovan Mitchell gets drafted by Denver, and then they obviously flip him to Utah. So another what if they had kept Denver, keeps him. There's a lot of, and then you got Bam going to Miami. And that fills out the lottery. Then you got Justin Jackson, Justin Patton, wasn't in the league for a cup of coffee. DJ Wilson had a couple years in the league. TJ Leaf. I know. I always whenever I think of TJ Leaf, I just think of LeVar Ball just absolutely destroying him and saying he's not good. So that's my remembrance of TJ Leaf. John Collins, he's still in the league, still being a productive player. Harry Giles, one of the,
bigger what ifs coming out of high school for sure.
Yeah, he's gonna always, because he tore his ACL a few times in high school. He was the number one recruit in the country. Going to Duke, just dealt with injuries. Kind of reminds me of AJ Griffin and Jalen Johnson scenarios, for Duke. Just quite never lived up. Terrence Ferguson was a high flyer. He had a couple calls. Jared Allen obviously has been a very productive NBA player, an all-star. OG Anunoby with the New York Knicks right now, just signed a big contract. Tyler Lydon, I honestly don't remember Tyler Lydon, to be honest. And Zayas Peasant, he's not in the league anymore. That Caleb Swanigan,
Swanigan was pretty good. I do remember him at Purdue. He had that really good.
Was he the one where he got really big and people were starting to bully him online stuff? Kyle Kuzma, drafted by Brooklyn.
That's the thing about this draft is it's that late first where you find some gems like Kuzma at 27. Tony Bradley was good for a few years. Derek White at 29. Josh Hart at 30. And even Frank Jackson played in the league for a while at 31. So we were talking the late part of this draft because it was just a pretty good draft. This is a pretty good draft because I think we're going to be doing the lottery part of it, but we're going to have some honorable mentions of guys who are still in the league, which when we're talking about guys 7-8 years later that are still kicking around outside of the lottery, it's impressive. There was a lot of talent in this draft for sure.
Yeah, and then like I said, second round, some names. You got Thomas Bryant, who's still in the league. He's had some solid moments. Isaiah Hardenstein, he just got paid. He's a big part of. He was a big part of what the Knicks did last year. Now what he's doing so far, with OKC, he's a part of a team that may be, a title favorite. So he's had Dylan Brooks. He signed a nice contract last year. It was a big part of what Memphis was doing for all those years. Doing good things with the Rockets, who are in the semifinals of the play-in tournament. Not the play-in tournament, the season tournament. There's so many names. The Everett's Cup, the Holiday Bowl Cup. I don't know what these names are, man. Too many names. Is anyone else? No, nobody else really notable.
Monte Morris was the only one.
Monte Morris is still in the league. Yeah, he's kicking it. That's a deal. He's had a nice, solid career. And Sterling Brown had some moments. But yeah, everybody else, Concards, had some moments. But yeah, other than that, no one else really notable names. Semi Ojeleye, did Jordan Bell, two-time champion with the Warriors. But yeah, some solid value in that second round, but so obviously some disappointments at the top of the draft. But for the most part, overall as a whole, not a bad draft. You got some guys who are still key contributors to teams to this day.
Because I think what you'll notice too with the lottery, because that's what we'll be drafting. None of these guys are fringe, could be on their way out in a couple of years. Pretty much all of these guys we're expecting to be kicking around the league another 3, 4, 5 years. So to have that many guys in one draft be potentially in the league in a decade, I think that's the sign of a really good, this is a really good draft over the last 10 years. This is one of the better ones for sure.
All right, so we're going to go into the draft. We're just going to do the lottery. I'm going to start with the number 1 pick. I think we kind of know. I think we all would have made this move even back in 2017. Yeah. Should have been the move, but it will not be Markelle Fultz. Philadelphia takes Jason Tatum with the number 1 pick. Sorry.
This is what's so fascinating is you look at what played out the next 7 or 8 years between Philly and Boston, because Boston the year prior took Jaylen Brown, then they get Tatum. But we had a scenario where it could have been Tatum and Embiid and Ben Simmons. Like, that would have been a process that we maybe could have trusted and actually had a bit of faith in, because Tatum would have, what we've seen play out over the last 7 or 8 years is he's always available. He's a great scorer. He's a great two-way guy. And that's kind of like Philly could have been a problem defensively with a guy like Tatum, because him and Simmons running around guarding guys would have been very problematic for the Eastern Conference. So I don't think that there's any doubt that Tatum is number one in this draft, especially since he won the title last year. Still is the best player on the Celtics. As much as people love to poke fun when he has off shooting nights, he is Boston's number one guy. So I think this is a pretty easy 1-1.
Yeah, this should have been the pick, but it was not the pick. I forgot my draft chime. But we'll do it for your pick. All right, Ken, you're on the clock.
So this is kind of there's two guys here, and I think it's kind of a preference thing. If I was the Lakers and I had to pick between one of these two guys to have played for my team for the last 8 years, I would have gone with Donovan Mitchell, personally. I like his flexibility of he can play the one.
Donovan's the pick?
Donovan's the pick. Could have been one, could play the one, could play the two. Would prefer him at the two, honestly. But I think that if you draft Donovan Mitchell and you would have paired him with Brandon Ingram, that would have been a really fascinating group. And I want to point out who the Lakers had on their roster at this time, because I thought that this was so funny to go through and just read the names. So keep in mind, and you're going to be familiar with a lot of these guys, Julius Randle was on the Lakers that year. Kyle Kuzma, I'm sure he'll get drafted at some point, but he's in this draft. He was the later pick for the Lakers, was viewed as the steal of the draft. They still had Jordan Clarkson. They had Isaiah Thomas. They had KCP. They had Josh Hart was on this team. Larry Nance Jr. was on this team. Alex Caruso was on this team, but he wasn't playing very much at that time. And they had Zubac on this team. All guys who are still in the league. Yeah. If you took this roster and planted it in 2024, that's actually a really good roster, top to bottom.
It really
because
is.
You would have Ingram, Kuzma, Clarkson, Randall. Like, that's a playoff team in the East for sure, if you plant those guys 8 years later.
If it wasn't the Lakers,
if
there's any other franchise that's
they
not
could have grown together and actually.
It wasn't in any big market. If it's not a New York or an LA team, they let this team build and let it grow, let it marinate, and see what it is. But the fact you guys are the Lakers, and it's like, all right, we don't allow ourselves to be patient. You're kind of like, a typical big market team. You just don't have that patience. And listen, you won a championship, and you're always. It's really hard to be like, oh, was it? It's not worth it because you won a championship. So
what's so funny though is Lakers fans will tell you that this is like the dark ages of the franchise.
Oh yeah, I heard that. I'm like, did you not see some of those end of those Kobe years? They were 10 times worse.
No. Like when Robert Sacre was playing minutes, like that was the dark ages.
Robert Sacre, Jeremy Lin, and
was starting to trend back up, and ultimately led to LeBron a year or two later. So let's not panic too much. This was not a terrible roster, and as I said, there's a lot of those guys that are in this draft, but also still in the league and very productive. So you're right. If this is the Pelicans who had this roster, like, they're growing together. They're having plenty of time to maybe figure it out. But just because it is the Lakers, they did not have this roster for very long. But I think Donovan Mitchell's the clear, for me, number 2 in this draft.
Yeah, because you only had it for a year because LeBron got there and then he got hurt because it looked like it might have worked.
First year with LeBron, and everyone was like, "Wow, is LeBron washed in
Oh,
like
he was like
2018.
he was 34, right? He was like 34 at this time, whatever. Yeah, because I remember I think he hurt his groin and he missed some time, and then they wound up missing the playoffs. But obviously, LeBron is on a different timeline, and it was he wanted to win, so that was the case. But let's go with the third pick. The Boston Celtics take De'Aaron Fox.
Yeah.
Point guard out of the University of Kentucky.
So I'm curious, did you have Fox at 3 on your board, or did you have him at 2 ahead of Mitchell?
No, I had him 3.
Okay, so we are in agreement there. Geez, we're already starting down this road again of agreeing on all the picks. But I do feel like the top half, this was very clearly like Tatum was on his own level, and then it was Mitchell and Fox were 2, 3, and then the next couple picks will also drop down like one more spot of these are still franchise guys that we're talking about here. And Fox coming out of Kentucky, a lot of people loved Monk as well. And because that backcourt was the one that took on Lonzo and UCLA in the tournament. So, yeah, I think Fox is the clear number 3. I don't know. What have you got to say about him?
Yeah, no, I thought he was so dynamic at Kentucky, and then what he did in the tournament, and when you watched him at Kentucky, I was just like, yeah, I mean, this guy's like, he's better than Lonzo Ball. I didn't think that was really that much of a, I was wondering like why is he not being considered to be going to the Lakers?
Do you think that if you flip what college they were at, that the Lakers draft Fox at 2? Because I think that with Lonzo being at UCLA, I think that played a big factor. Like, obviously, his dad was his biggest hype man, but I think just the whole UCLA thing, and Magic was worried about the team with where it was at that time, and thought, well, franchise guy, already went to college down the street. He's got to be the guy that we draft here, as much as everyone was saying, no, like maybe he's not the second best guy in this draft.
No, I agree. I think if you switch it, I think it's Fox, and it's not even. I mean, maybe Fox goes with 1 because of that. It just there's just so many things. But I know Kyrie is there. Right. This is when he gets traded to Cleveland from Cleveland, right? I think this is the first year of Kyrie there. But I still wouldn't hesitate because there's still. As a GM, I still in the back of my head, like, yeah, Kyrie said he's going to stay with us in Boston, but there's still like he's shown that, hey, he's a little different and he might not stay. And obviously he wound up not staying. He went to Brooklyn. We know how that ended. But, De'Aaron Fox, to me, like I said, if you switch to the jerseys, he's number 1 pick. I just don't. He was absolutely electric at Kentucky, and I think he put him in Boston with Jaylen Brown. I think. Obviously, I don't know if they have the same amount of success, but I think we appreciate De'Aaron Fox more now than with him in Sacramento, where he's putting up numbers. I always bring it up with him and Brunson, like he's putting up just as good numbers as Brunson. But guess what?
He's not on TV 2-3 times a week.
Brunson's is in New York. He's on ESPN all the time, and when you're in Sacramento, probably one of the bottom markets. You're not gonna get as much love and all that. But De'Aaron Fox to be going to Boston because if Kyrie does leave, he still does leave. Boom.
There's a big hole at that spot. Yeah,
there's a big hole, and you just insert him. You could probably just have him playing some off ball. I mean, Kyrie plays off ball anyway a lot, so De'Aaron can have some on ball possessions. That they could share that spot, and then if Kyrie leaves, you insert him, and now he'll take off. De'Aaron Fox still takes off, and it's still the De'Aaron Fox we see in Sacramento. So,
but Fox, I think, has a legitimate case as being a top 5 guy to come out of the Calipari factory that was Kentucky. Because outside of Anthony Davis and maybe Devin Booker, and now SGA has ascended to that, but he wasn't that in college. He was good. He wasn't that. But he's surpassed like. John Wall and DeMarcus Cousins got a lot of love for that one year, but they didn't have the longevity that that we've seen out of a guy like De'Aaron Fox. Like, he's sneaky been unreal for 8 years. And again, it's because of where he plays. We don't talk about Sacramento very much. We did love the year that we light the beam. Like, that was a great storyline in the playoffs. And who knows, that I think they're just outside the playoff picture right now, but they've tried to put guys around them. I will give Sacramento credit. They are finally trying to. They brought in Sabonis. They brought in DeMar DeRozan. They've been trying to tweak it. It's just really hard to win in the West. So I think, Fox is the easy 3.
Yep. So De'Aaron Fox goes to Boston. All right. Phoenix Suns on the clock.
Phoenix Suns on the clock. It feels weird to think about this guy wearing this jersey, but he currently plays for a team that's representative of Heat in the East. But now when we head out west,
is he a man of culture?
I guess we could say that, a man of culture. But we'll talk about another Kentucky Factory guy in Bam Adebayo. For me, goes at number 4 in this draft. I love Bam. To me, he's a top 3 center in the league. Just what he does on the defensive side, he's an underrated passer. He's gotten better every year scoring wise as well. Plays really well in that Heat system. I question whether, if he goes to Phoenix, if we see the development that we did. Just because, look, like, Phoenix is not a team that is well run. I think that's pretty.
And this time, this was like all
this
time.
Was this was dark in Phoenix.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this was this post Dragic, post Isaiah Thomas, or were they still there at that time?
No, they might have.
I think it was post.
I think this was the year before they drafted Dragan Bender. Was Bender?
Well, Bender, I think, was the year before, because they go 8 in the next year.
Yeah, because 8 in his
which again, this probably changes the trajectory of Phoenix, because if you draft Bam at 4, you're not drafting 8 and at 1 the next year. They're probably looking at Trae Young or Luka.
Yeah, because Bender's the year before, and then 15 they drafted Book.
Yeah, so you just had Book there. So you would have had Book, Bam, and then the following year you would have probably been looking at one of the guards out of Trae or Luka. But instead, at number 4, they drafted Josh Jackson.
Josh Jackson,
no longer in the league. But I mean, that's the thing. So they hit on Booker, and then you had a couple of bad drafts, because
bad.
Bender, Josh Jackson, and Ayton is still in the league, but obviously would not have been the number 1 pick.
But there, he had his moments. He had his especially when CP was there.
He wasn't. If you're looking at that draft, he probably doesn't crack the top 5, or if he does, it's at the tail end of it. So
he's probably a lottery pick. If we do a redraft, he's probably somewhere in the back end lottery, just off the top of the head.
Yeah. So instead, like, they could have gone Booker.
Bam. Yeah, because they don't need Ayton if they have Bam. If you see the development of Bam, you're not taking Ayton. So let's say you do have the number 1 pick, like. Now maybe they still mess up. Maybe they take
more likely Trae, because they would have learned from the Dragan mistake of going European at that time, and they maybe lean more towards the American guard. But just imagine Book, Young, and Adebayo as a trio. That would have been something. A lot of 3-point shooting and a center that's really versatile.
I'm excited about doing an 18 one. We have to do an 18 one, because now I think I'm getting just excited about the 18 redraft and the 17 redraft, because that's another one where the Knicks mix stuff too.
Well, we could say that about a lot of them. But anyways, Bam is number 4 for me. I think clear cut 4. I'm curious who you have at 5.
Yeah, Bam at 4 is not bad. We have the Sacramento Kings with the 5th pick in the draft. Obviously, they took De'Aaron Fox. De'Aaron Fox went third to Boston. With the 5th pick in this draft, I had a toss-up, but I am going to take Jared Allen.
Jared Allen, hey? Okay.
Jared Allen. Like I said, I liked him in Texas. He was big, who could block shots. There was, can do a lot of things in the dunker spot, obviously. Very efficient. I know he's a big, but still he finishes around the rim at a high level. Who did Sacramento take a hit before this? So I'm just trying to think off the top of my head.
Like the year before, who did Sacramento take?
It took Marquise Chris. So they didn't have. I mean, they still had was DeMarcus. Was he
Marcus
in
would
New
have still
Orleans?
been hanging around there at that time, I think, because he would have gone the next year maybe to New Orleans.
Let's see.
Because he spent a little bit of time there. But no, I really like Jared Allen. I remember when he was a part of that trade when they did the Kyrie. Was it the Kyrie deal? Jared Allen was a part
to go to Brooklyn. To go to Brooklyn.
Yeah. No, when he left Brooklyn, sorry, because he ended up going to Cleveland in that big the Harden trade.
No.
Because there was a big trade where a bunch of players got swapped and he ended up in Cleveland. But I really liked him in Brooklyn. Like I was a big fan of him when he was on that Nets team. And then honestly, it's probably worked out for the better looking at where Brooklyn is at now and what Cleveland is at. Like he's been a very solid center in the league, especially on the defensive side. So I'm a big fan of his. I had him going 6. So we did differ in this draft, at least on one of these picks. So
yeah, I had him between there was 2 guys I was thinking of, but I was like, you know what? Sacramento, I think I'm just, DeMarcus Cousins is on his way out. Couldn't need a young big to fill out. And I think, knowing what we know now, I think Jared Allen would have been a nice piece for Sacramento going forward.
Okay. I don't hate it. He is a guy that's been an all-star in his career so far. So, I mean, shout out to Jared Allen.
Yeah.
It's tough to be mad when you're picking an all-star there. The one that I had just ahead of him who would now go to Orlando at the 6th pick for me would be Lauri Markkanen.
Lauri, yeah, that was out of Gonzaga.
And you know what's crazy?
Where do you go? Arizona. He feels like he's a Gonzaga player. I get confused. He feels like a Gonzaga player.
Look of a Gonzaga player.
Yeah, he looks like a.
Oh, he got this tall Finnish guy that. But keep in mind when he got drafted, because he went in that draft to Minnesota, but then got traded to the Bulls. Mm-hmm. Remember those first couple of years? The narrative around Lauri Markkanen was, well, he can't stay healthy. Like when he's playing, he's pretty good, but he'll probably be out of the league because he can't stay healthy.
Yeah.
And then he gets a new change of scenery, and now he's an all-star. He's on a bad team right now. Let's face it. Utah is not trying to win basketball games, and
they're buying high school players to go play for the state school.
Yeah. So I do think that Markkanen, if he gets drafted to Orlando, I don't think that he lasts. I think it would have been pretty similar to Chicago, where, look, the injuries would have hurt him early in his career, but he ended up in the right spot and made the most of it. So I've got Markkanen at 6. Probably won't be an all-star this year, although his numbers are really good just because of how bad the team is. But I think he's just such a great modern NBA player of what you want. I think you could plug Markkanen into 25 teams in this league, and he would figure out a way to help contribute to winning. Just the style of play is just perfect for this age.
He's a plug and play type of guy where you don't have to worry about, having the offense around him. He's your 3rd and 4th option. You're feeling really good. And I almost gave up on him because he had kind of a hot start to his career, and then it kind of had a little bit of a drop, and you're like, is this who he is? But we tend to forget that everyone has different development stages, and where you play matters. And he was in Chicago, where it was just not good. Then he goes to Cleveland, has that little. He was there for a little bit, cup of coffee, but shows that he could play, and then he goes obviously to Utah, and
he felt like a throw-in in that Mitchell trade. It was like
kind of was,
like he won't help them win, but he's at least a kind of a transition type guy, and he's he's done well. Maybe it's that military service that he did that just toughened him up, and that really grueling Finnish military service that he had to go through that one summer.
All right, that was, what was that, like a day he had to do, like something like that?
I think he had to do, like, it was an off season or where like he had to spend a few months doing it, but still, one of the funnier things. It's happened as well. I know on the PGA Tour there was a couple guys who were legitimately playing not just for their tour cards, but so they could avoid their military service. So that's an added level of pressure when you've got that on the line.
Oh yeah, definitely. All right, so we got Lauri Markkanen with the 6th pick going to Orlando. The Minnesota Timberwolves are on the clock. I'm going with the poor man's Kawhi Leonard, guy who was in Canada for a while. Now in the great state of New York. Sometimes locking up your favorite player. On other nights, it's the Hawks. He didn't. But OG Anunoby going to Minnesota, and this pick wound up getting traded to Chicago, right? That's what. But OG going here. He's a player. When I remember him in Indiana, a lot of people kept mentioning the Kawhi. He has a lot of Kawhi in him, and you see that at times because he's also like Kawhi, where he's also on the injury list a lot. So a lot of similarities, and his demeanor. I think that's where you heard it, because you heard about his demeanor, the way he is. He's very, the very straight. Like even sometimes,
I think that's what probably hindered him the most in his career, is that we all view what he could be, and I think he just needs to believe that he could have been that. Because don't get me wrong, he's one of the better two-way wings that you'll have in the league, especially on the defensive side. But sometimes you're just looking at him like, oh, gee, go get a bucket, man. Like you're just standing in the corner. You're just letting everyone else do it.
And he's done that this year with New York. He has a more prevalent, part in the offense. But you saw in Toronto where he was kind of the 4th, 5th, and you're like, there's more. There's more to his game than we're seeing. When we watching him, I was like, we're going to see that, right? And then we didn't. And then it feels like this year we're finally getting to see him be more of the player that we all.
And I think it's because in Toronto, yes, it was Kawhi, but it was also like Van Vliet was a score first guy, and Lowry was more of a score first point. I know he distributed, but he was more of a score first point. Yeah. And then you had all the bench guys as well. That Norman Powell has always been just a scorer, and so he felt like, well, I'm just going to lock people up, and we're all looking at him like, well, but you can be so much more. You don't just have to do that.
Yeah. And it definitely feels like he's opened up his offense a lot more this year, and being more of a slasher. Obviously, shooting the 3-ball solid, but he's had a great career, pretty good career, a champion, and had a nice contract, re-signing with the New York Knicks, got over $200 million. But yeah, I'm going to go to OG Anunoby with this pick. But I think we got all the All-Stars so far, right? We got all the All-Stars. There are 5 All-Stars. 5 All-Stars.
6 All-Stars.
6 All-Stars. Who's that 6th guy?
Jared Allen had 1 All-Star appearance, I think.
So we got Tatum, Fox, Mitchell, Bam, Jared, Lauri. Okay. That's who I didn't put down.
So that's why I was saying, I think once you get past that Bam, Allen, and Markkanen range, that was like the All-Stars, and now we're into the really good role player part of this draft.
So Ken?
I'll be honest, I had OG 1 spot down, and it's because I think that there's a better two-way guy who's coming off of such a great year with the Celtics. So I'm going to go Derek White at this spot.
Derek White with the pick.
So
he went to Colorado. He was a no-star, and then just got better and better and better in college. And he
ended up with the Spurs, where he was pretty good there for a while. But once he got to Boston, then he kind of elevated. He went from being a good starter to a great role guy off the bench. 2-time all defensive second team the last couple of years. I think he's just slightly better defensively than OG, and I haven't had to wait for Derek White to go and like produce offensively either. He had some great moments in the playoffs last year. If we had done this draft, 8 months ago, I probably would have OG ahead of him, but just for me, Derek White. And this would have been the 8th pick, correct? Which meant that this is who the New York Knicks would have drafted.
This would have been a good pick. It is better than who we took, with Frank Ntilikina.
Yeah,
so you can't go wrong with that. A guy is a two-way player, and obviously his defense was always there, but his offense is something that has gotten better throughout the years. Like I said, he went to a perfect situation with the original pick and going to San Antonio, so he got to develop those intangibles.
That was actually what I was going to say. Was I don't know if he lasts that long in the league if he didn't get drafted where he did, because keep in mind he won a G League title because he was with the Austin Spurs in 17-18. So he wasn't even on the roster the first year. He was just a G League guy, developed in that Spurs system, became a great two-way guy, and then obviously goes on to have a long career and is going to have many more years in this league. So Derek White for me would have been huge if the Knicks would have drafted him. But again, like hindsight's 2020, we were talking about Derek White as the 29th, 30th pick that draft.
Mm-hmm.
So he was never in consideration to be the number 8 pick. But I mean, hey, you guys could have had lightning in a bottle maybe if he would have.
If you know what you know now, he may have changed the culture a lot quicker. Just he's just that type of player. But who knows? That Knicks organization was still. We were still known. We were still a clown, essentially a clown organization. It was the end of the mellow time, and it was just still bad times. So, but sometimes you just need that right player to help change that. And maybe Derek White would have been that guy, but definitely wasn't Frank Ntilikina. That's all I can know. But all right, Knicks are off the clock. We got the Dallas Mavericks. This is where I got a few guys in mind, but I'm going to go with Malik Monk here. I'm going to go with Malik Monk.
You're going Malik already, hey?
Going Malik Monk. I think his dynamic scoring. He's been a bucket. Throughout his years. I know there's some other guys. There's Kuzma, there's Collins, but I've always liked Malik Monk, and I think him coming out, he was someone that was in this range, and Dallas took Dennis Smith Jr. here, and obviously we know who they take the next year. So I think if you pair Malik Monk and you have Luka, for next season after that, I think you have a nice dynamic backcourt. So I'm going to go Malik Monk, and some people thought that he would have the higher upside than Fox. I remember people saying that because he was such a lightning. People were like, he's a better perimeter scorer than DeMar DeRozan. Like they put him in that realm. I heard people say, and I was like, whoa, that's pretty high. Then I'm like, why is he the 8th in that 8th?
I always thought that he.
And we've seen why he was in that range, because I've just seen his career. Like he's been a good scorer, but we see kind of why he was in that range.
It felt like if he was given the opportunity to be Jamal Crawford or Lou Williams, he would be that.
Yeah.
Like he could definitely be, because around that time was when the 6th man was probably at its height, because those Clippers teams were Jamal was basically a 6th starter, and Lou Williams was that way in Toronto and some other spots. So I think the feeling was, well, if you draft Monk and you just let him go because he's a microwave, then he could drop 18 a night, 20 a night. If he's in the right situation. But I agree. I wasn't as crazy about him as other people. I think this happens all the time, especially with the casuals. You don't watch college ball in December, January, February. You watch a couple of March games where a guy gets hot and you go, oh man, this guy, he's going to be something at the next level. And sometimes it might just be a couple game outlier more than anything else. Still obviously been a really good pro, but maybe not quite where he got drafted. So
yeah, and like I said, we've seen his career in the NBA so far, and we kind of get why he was in that range, because he was never going to be quite DeMar DeRozan-esque, where he's going to be a 25 and an efficient 25 per game scorer. But we've seen he's had his moments where he could be a 15 to 17 guy coming off the bench and really give you a spark. But Malik Monk, I'll take care with the 9th pick. To go into Dallas. All right. 10th pick, Sacramento's back on the clock.
So this is where, if I was redrafting, I'm thinking about the fact that Allen got taken at 5. And if we're talking about Cousins leaving around that time and you needed someone to help change your culture, I would take Dylan Brooks at number 10, because I think that if you put Jared Allen and Dylan Brooks, first of all, defensively, your team just got infinitely better because look, is Dylan Brooks a pest? Of course he
He's
is.
in there.
He's one of the best in the league at doing it. He's also a pretty good perimeter scorer. Not great. Like, you can't let him go and score or shoot it 15, 18 times a night, but he's someone that can give you 12 from that 3 spot. And I think he's had a really good career. In Memphis, he was very solid on some of those playoff teams. We're seeing now where Houston's at. A lot of it has to do with the young guys, but it also has to do with guys like him and Van Vliet coming in and help changing that culture a bit with Udoka as well at the same time. So I'm taking Dylan Brooks here. I think that he's a great two-way player that would help you at that 10 spot, because you're not looking for a guy that goes and drops 20 at the 10 spot. You're looking for, like, who's a good solid pro that we could put in our rotation right away and be better. And so I like Dylan Brooks at that spot.
Dylan Brooks. Yeah, and like I said, we have Jared Allen going 5, Dylan Brooks going at 10. This potentially can change, like you said, the culture of what we think of Sacramento around this time, where it's not good. The culture isn't good, and maybe this is the start of that, the start of the changing of this culture. So Dylan Brooks and Jared Allen definitely would have been a nice start to fix that, because you got 2 defensive menace, and a guy, Jared Allen's going to crash the board, and Dylan Brooks is going to be a pest, especially you need that out west around this time too. So all right, Dylan Brooks with the 10th pick. All right, we are going to Charlotte with the 10th pick.
Is this 10th or 11th? I thought
11th pick. I can't read. I'm sorry, my reading is bad. The 11th pick. Charlotte originally takes Malik Monk, who we have going 9th. Tough, because it gets tight here. It gets tight, and it's between 2 guys I have. And I'm going to go with, Jordan's still at the helm. So we got to think like Jordan.
Yeah, you have to think like Jordan here. What would he do?
If I think like Jordan, it might be like freaking, Ivan Rabb with this pick. But I'll try to be logical. I think he goes to John Collins. I'm going to go John Collins.
Okay.
John Collins. Obviously, he's a freak athlete. I think, who's on Charlotte, man?
Charlotte back in 2017. Kemba's still there.
Kemba's still there. Okay.
Do they have Al Jefferson still? Or is
Al still there?
I mean, those were not good Charlotte teams. That they were basically just leaning on Kemba to do it for them. But they did have Carter Williams was there, Batum was there.
Batum's there, right? Because he just signed it.
Kaminsky was there. Jeremy Lamb was there. Marvin
Williams. They don't have
Miller.
a core that you're like, okay. So yeah, I think that's a good pick. They like to take chances on some of these, athletic guys. So I think John Collins would have been good here. Whether he has the same success he had with Atlanta especially when they got Trae Young. Obviously, the next year they get Trae Young. Does he have the same success? Who knows? But I think knowing Jordan, he probably takes a shot. Guy's athletic, sees if he can get something out of him, try to get a spark in the franchise. So I'm gonna go John Collins here. But he's had a really solid career though to this day. He's in Utah. He's stuck in Utah. But he's someone that I feel like will someone will pick him up. But yeah, he's had a good career. But yeah, I would go him. Going to Charlotte with this pick.
He's honestly a guy who I forgot about until we were reading through names, and part of it is just the franchises that he's played for. We know that he spent some time in Atlanta as well, where you can get forgotten about, and now he's getting forgotten about a bit in Utah, but still a very solid player. I had him at 11 there, so we were the same on that pick. When we're talking about 12. There's a lot of names now where you're just starting to get into pretty good role players. And I think that if I'm Detroit around this time, I think I'm drafting Josh Hart.
Josh Hart. I was thinking the same too. I had him penciled in at 13.
Yeah, I just think
Nova boy.
Those teams were not very good. Those Pistons teams back then, obviously why they were drafting in this spot. But I think that Hart's carved out a very nice role and a very good career so far. I think he's a guy that is just going to figure out a way to be in the league for the next 5-6 years for sure, because of the way that he plays and the way that he makes guys better around him. And honestly, you look back at that Detroit team, is Blake Griffin, Tobias Harris, Avery Bradley, Drummond, Jackson, Bullock. They do need kind of one of those just like utility guys that can do it all for you. And so I think that he's one of those guys. So I'll go with Josh Hart.
Yeah, a guy who's, had a very good college career, has, was part of a national championship at Villanova. Just a really, really good player, and just a guy who's just solid. I mean, he's a kind of like almost like a triple double machine in the league right now.
Yeah.
He's and everywhere he goes seems like, and it's crazy to think that his first whatever amount of years with the Lakers, he never made the playoffs, but he always felt like he was a winning type of player, though. Always had that feeling, and now you're seeing it in New York, and he's done really good things so far. But yeah, Detroit kind of needs that type of player, unselfish. He's just going to do a lot of the little things, and Josh Hart definitely brings that to Detroit. And this is when Detroit is going to go through a lot of bad times because this is Blake down the downhill.
This was a bad injury year for them. Blake only played 25 games. Tobias was out a lot. Avery Bradley was out a lot. They didn't have a lot that season, that's for sure. So
yeah,
needed a guy like Hart who came in with a winning mentality, I think, more than anything else, not just a guy looking to put up empty stats.
Yeah, so he fits perfect. Because who was this? Who did they take here at this pick? It was Luke Kennard.
Which honestly, I won't speak for you, but I don't think he's going to get drafted with one of the last two picks. But he's a solid pro. He does one thing very well, and he's in the age where that one thing keeps you paid for a number of years.
Yep, that's for sure. All right, so Josh Hart goes to Detroit. We have the Denver Nuggets with the 13th pick. They took Donovan Mitchell and then flipped that going to Utah. Donovan Mitchell we had going to the Los Angeles Lakers with the number 2 pick. So who goes to the 13th pick? I think it's got to be Kyle Kuzma, right? I think it's Kyle Kuzma.
Okay.
He went to Mizzou, right? Did he go to Mizzou? Okay. Mizzou or Colorado?
I think he's a Mizzou guy.
He's a Mizzou Tiger, and I think he's a 3 or 4 year guy. So he comes in with a lot of experience, and obviously, he's the one in that Lakers trade that didn't get traded, because they valued his experience. And remember, Utah. He went to the Utah. Yeah, it felt like it was one of those schools out west, but yeah, he went to coming out. He was a very experienced player, and he came in. And remember, there was a lot of people because he had instant success more than Brandon Ingram. And people were like, oh, no, is he a better player? But obviously, Brandon Ingram's a baby still. He's only 18, 19, and Kuzma's at this age. I think he's 22, 23. He's coming in a lot more experience. Obviously, Ingram's has been a higher level player, but Kuzma showed his worth, especially winning a championship with the Lakers, that he was a very good, fourth option on a team. And I think he comes into Denver. Well, he's going to Utah, so he stays home essentially. He gets to stay, with the school he played for. He stays in Utah, and I still think is a contributing player. Obviously, that Utah's not going to have that much success because in this situation. There is no Donovan Mitchell because he's obviously in LA. But Kyle Kuzma still, I think he's someone that can, be like a 17, 18 point per game guy at his highest. And, depending on how Utah builds their team after this, they'll still be solid. But yeah, Kyle Kuzma to you here would be a good pick for Denver. And then obviously they get shipped away to Utah. But yeah, he's been a good pro. He obviously likes money because he's still in Washington Wizards, and he likes the shots, and he wants to just shoot it up there. But he still could be as a player in this league that if somebody trades for him, he could be a contributing factor to a winning team. He's shoulder with the Lakers. So yeah, Kyle Kuzma out of Utah going to Utah.
Yeah, he was all rookie first team. He looked like the steal of the draft back in this draft. So
yeah.
14, final pick for this draft. I know that we'll probably do some honorable mentions of guys that we didn't draft afterwards, but this is a tough one because you have to weigh who at their peak is the best player at 14. And I think when you have a healthy Lonzo Ball, he is the best player available here. Now, knowing that he's dealt with injuries the last couple of years, but look, early on, even in LA, he looked like a very good defensive guard. When he got to Chicago, he looked like, wow, he might change the Bulls because they're going to actually have a lockdown defensive team. And injuries have hurt him the last little bit. But I think that if he got drafted at 14, keeping in mind that he would go to the Heat, that's a guy. Back then, they had Dragic and they had Tyler Johnson as their point guards. So not a lot of defense at that spot either. I think that he would have come in and fit in very well because this is pre-Jimmy Butler. This is Hassan Whiteside, Dwayne Wade, and Justice Winslow. That's this Miami team. And I think that if they were going to buy into that defensive culture, Lonzo would be the pick here for them logically. So I take Lonzo at 14.
Yeah, and like I said, we forget how good Lonzo was starting to become, especially once he got to Chicago. I mean, that we always talk about it. Chicago was cooking something before he got down. They were top 3 seed in the East, I believe. And just remember, I think De'Aaron Fox is better in college, but Lonzo was still a good college basketball player. And I still think if it wasn't for his dad, kind of just bringing all this attention to him, maybe I don't think he goes as high as 2. Maybe he's still a lottery type pick, but his dad's marketing definitely helped him up. People think it was negative. It actually was a positive for him because there's realistically, he's probably, like I said, he's not a top 2 pick. I never thought he was a top 2 pick in this draft, but his dad did a hell of a job. People may think differently.
He's still he's a 5th or 6th pick guy in that draft, but his dad, and you know what? We at the time clowned his dad. We all didn't want a dad like that. We all didn't look, I wouldn't be thrilled if my dad was saying some of the crazy stuff that LeVar was saying on TV, but to have your dad be the biggest hype man in the world and just talking so glowingly about you, I think that's what everyone wants. It's just he tended to say some crazy stuff, including to Molly on First Take. We all remember that moment.
Oh, yeah. Well, it got him banned from there. Yeah, I remember.
And he said some crazy stuff to who was Colin's girl back then? Christine Leahy, was it?
Oh, yeah.
He said some crazy stuff there too. But Lonzo, the player,
he still went too.
And his dad made him millions of dollars extra by upselling his son to the general public. So the only other guy that I would have considered there, but again, the injuries have just derailed him, is Jonathan Isaac. I think that we both appreciate what he is as a player. He just has had such terrible luck. We're starting to see it a bit this year, and I think that that's one of the better storylines this year was Jonathan Isaac playing well. So
yeah,
he's one of those honorable mention guys. A couple of guys that we didn't mention earlier too, who were just flat out undrafted guys, like Luke Cornett carved out a favorable role in the league for someone that's undrafted, and a guy that has hung around Toronto for a few years, Chris Boucher at the center spot. he's another one that I think
Isaiah Hardenstein, he's someone I probably
he
would
just got paid
consider,
$100 million this summer.
and he's playing good basketball.
Playing good.
Playing good. With
Jordan Bell had a 5-year run that was really good, and a lot of it had to do with where he got drafted. But he was a contributor on those championship teams, no doubt about it. So he's another guy in this draft. But I think we're gonna look back on this draft in 5-10 years and realize how really good this one was. This was a look. And this happens with a lot of drafts, but there's a select few superstars, but there was ample opportunity to find rotational guys that can play 25-30 minutes in a playoff series. That's what you could have got out of this draft.
Yeah, and like I said, there's the Zach Collins of the world, the Tony Bradleys, the Justin Jacksons. There's some guys in this where maybe they were overdrafted a little bit, but they still somehow carved out a nice, solid NBA career. And are still kicking. Listen, regardless of where you get drafted, if you're still in the league right now, you're 8 years in. I mean, you're doing something right? Like, listen, the draft is a crapshoot. Where you go is obviously a big factor, but there's still some guys that are kicking it that were late first round picks. I mean, or second, like we just mentioned, Dillon Brooks. Some of the guys we did in the draft, like these guys were, Kyle Kuzma's and the Dillon Brookses and the Josh Harts. Derek White's. These are guys that were drafted late and are still key players on teams. Like Dillon Brooks is on a resurgent Rockets team. Josh Hart is on a New York Knicks team that has championship aspirations and is a big part of that. So Kyle Kuzma's in Washington. But there's good value there, and this was a good one. This was a good draft. Obviously, some misses. Both our teams missed. I think we could say that both our teams missed, but it happens. My team. It happened a lot with my team, and if we do 18, we'll be talking about another miss.
If there's one thing that I can take away from this redraft is I think I've developed some closure around the Tatum stuff, because knowing that. Look, it wasn't all doom and gloom, because we go on and win a title a couple years later, and there was a lot of these pieces, including Lonzo, were included in a trade that ultimately led to a championship. So it upsets me that I never got to see my favorite college player outside of Redick in a Laker jersey, but I can accept it now because of what happened. So.
Yep, and with the Knicks, Franklin Lakina, there was a string of lots of bad drafts, but hey, we finally figured it out. It just took a few years later after that. So but it's just crazy. There's so many what ifs, like we mentioned before with the Jason Tatum stuff. Like, okay, there's the what if, like what if he was on the Lakers instead of being on the Celtics? But then there's the what if, like what if he gets traded, or what if he does that mean does LeBron? Like, what is LeBron's reaction? Like, does he keep Tatum instead of Kuzma? Does Kuzma, like, there's just so many factors, because, there's a lot of things, domino effects of Jason Tatum going to Boston instead of going to, and in Philly too. Like, is the process different now? Maybe does Ben Simmons feel a little bit more comfortable being the third option instead of the 2 option? And maybe that's builds for better chemistry, and maybe they have more success. We don't know, but there's a world of different scenarios that could change the NBA landscape to what it is. We could have a different NBA.
It can honestly, it's not even just one pick. It's what that one pick forces you to do the next year. That, like we mentioned, the Phoenix one. You go ahead and draft Josh Jackson, and because you didn't address center when you maybe could have the year prior, but you ultimately decided not to. And instead you draft DeAndre Ayton, and it's a snowball effect of, it really is. If you hit on a pick like a Devin Booker, you're amazing. But then when you followed up with Dragan Bender and Josh Jackson, then it takes you a little bit longer. So
yeah, and it's just like there's just so many different. It's crazy how the NBA can just be changed by one pick. Because if that happens. Let's say if Phoenix doesn't miss, they say they take who we have Phoenix taking. They take Bam Adebayo, okay, what is their situation the next year? And then does that change how Dallas approaches the trade to try to get Luka? Does that change there? Because what if Trey goes, there's just so many different domino effects. And that's the best part about doing stuff like this, because it gets your mind rolling, thinking of all the potential scenarios that could have changed the NBA for the future. But it didn't. This is what we have. You guys wound up winning a championship a few years later. The Knicks were still stinky for a few more years, but eventually changed it. So, who knows what if it would have happened, but this was it. So that is the 2017 NBA Draft Redraft podcast. Ken, I appreciate you coming on, my man.
Yeah, of course. Check out Shoot or Shoot Basketball Podcast. Chris was on there recently, getting back into the weekly flow. And then starting January 1, we're doing Competitive Hedge Daily again. Going to be 15, 20 minutes in the morning, just talking the daily betting slate and whatnot. And so really fired up for that. And Chris, it's always fun chatting with you and hopping on a pod. So we'll do another redraft sometime soon, I'm sure.
Yeah, 2018. We're already doing that. That's already happening in the books. So just letting people know. Because 2018 might be the most fun one, because there's a lot of, we're gonna have fun with that one. But yeah, make sure to follow me Off the Ball Pod on X, on all these other new social media sites that's going on, Threads, and the other one, I forgot the name of it already. Follow me there, Instagram, Off the Ball Pod. Make sure to follow on the Facebook page. Make sure to follow Off the Ball Network on Facebook and subscribe on YouTube. And check out all the great podcasters we have at the Off the Ball Network, OTB_network on X. Also check that out. So on that note, be well, be safe, take care. Don't draft Jaren Jackson. No, not Jaren Jackson. We got the wrong Jackson. Josh Jackson.
Don't draft Josh.
Don't draft Josh Jackson. Take care, guys.